Thank you for joining me for another reading through the Bible in chronological order. Today we read two chapters, 1 Kings 9 and 2 Chronicles 8. Chapter 9 of 1 Kings. When Solomon finished building the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all that Solomon desired to do, the Lord appeared to Solomon a second time, just as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I have heard your prayer and petition you have made before me. I have consecrated this temple you have built to put my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there at all times. As for you, if you walk before me as your forefather or as your father David walked, with a heart of integrity and in what is right, doing everything I have commanded you, and if you keep my statutes and ordinances, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised your father David, and you will never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. If you or your sons turn away from following me and do not keep my commands, my statutes that I have set before you, and if you go and serve other gods and bow and worship to them, I will cut off Israel from the land I gave them, and I will reject the temple I have sanctified for my name. Israel will become an object of scorn and ridicule among all the peoples. Though this temple is now exalted, everyone who passes by will be appalled and will scoff. They will say, why did the Lord do this to this land and this temple? When they will say, because they abandoned the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of the land of Egypt, they held on to other gods and bowed and worshiped to them and served them. Because of this, the Lord brought all this ruin on them. At the end of 20 years, during which Solomon had built the two houses, the Lord's temple and the royal palace, King Hiram of Tyre, having supplied him with cedar and cypress logs and gold for his every wish, King Solomon gave Hiram 20 towns in the land of Galilee. So Hiram went out from Tyre to look over the towns that Solomon had given him. But he was not pleased with them. So he said, what are these towns you've given me, my brother? So he called them the land of Kabul, as they are still called today. Now Hiram had sent the king 9,000 pounds of gold. This is the account of the forced labor that King Solomon had imposed to build the Lord's temple, his own palace, the supporting terraces, the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had attacked and captured Gezer. He then burned it, killed the Canaanites who lived in the city, and gave it as a dowry to his daughter, Solomon's wife. Then Solomon rebuilt Gezer, Lower Beth Horon, Baalath, Tamar, in the wilderness of Judah, all the storage cities that belonged to Solomon, the chariot cities, the cavalry cities, and whatever Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem, Lebanon, or anywhere else in the land of his dominion. As for all the peoples who remained of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites who were not Israelites, their descendants who remained in the land after them, those whom the Israelites were unable to destroy completely, Solomon imposed forced labor on them, and it is still this way today. But Solomon did not consign the Israelites to slavery. They were soldiers, his servants, his commanders, his captains, and commanders of his chariots and his cavalry. These were the deputies who were over Solomon's work, 550 who supervised the people during the work. Pharaoh's daughter moved from the city of David to the house that Solomon had built for her. He then built the terraces. 3 times a year, Solomon offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings on the altar he had built for the Lord, and he burned incense with them in the Lord's presence. So he completed the temple. King Solomon put together a fleet of ships at Ezion-Geber, which is near Elath, on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. With the fleet, Hiram sent his servants, experienced seamen, along with Solomon's servants, and they went to Ophir and acquired gold there, 16 tons, and delivered it to Solomon. 2 Chronicles 8. At the end of 20 years, during which Solomon had built the Lord's temple in his own palace, Solomon rebuilt the cities Hiram gave him and settled Israelites there. Solomon went to Hamath Zobah and seized it. He built Tadmor in the wilderness along with all the storage cities that he had built in Hamath. He built Upper Beth Horon and Lower Beth Horon, fortified cities with walls, gates, and bars. Baalath, all the storage cities that belonged to Solomon, all the chariot cities, the cavalry cities, and everything Solomon desired to build at Jerusalem, Lebanon, or anywhere else in the land of his dominion. As for all the peoples who remained of the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and Jebusites, who were not from Israel, their descendants who remained in the land after them, those the Israelites had not completely destroyed. Solomon imposed forced labor on them. It is this way today. But Solomon did not consign the Israelites to be slaves for his work. They were soldiers, commanders of his captains, and commanders of his chariots and his cavalry. These were King Solomon's deputies, 250 who supervised the people. Solomon brought the daughter of Pharaoh from the city of David to the house he had built for he said, "My wife must not live in the house of King David of Israel, because the places the ark of the Lord has come into are holy." At that time Solomon offered burnt offerings to the Lord on the Lord's altar he had made in front of the portico. He followed the daily requirement for offerings according to the commandment of Moses for Sabbaths, new moons, and the 3 annual appointed festivals: the festival of unleavened bread, the festival of weeks, and the festival of shelters. According to the ordinances of his father David, he appointed the divisions of the priest over their service, of the Levites over their responsibilities to offer praise and to minister before the priest, following the daily requirement, and of the gatekeepers by their divisions with respect to each temple gate. For this had been the command of David, the man of God. They did not turn aside from the king's command regarding the priest and the Levites concerning any matter or concerning the treasuries. All of Solomon's work was carried out from the day the foundation was laid for the Lord's temple until it was finished, so the Lord's temple was complete. At that time Solomon went to Ezion-Geber and to Elath on the seashore in the land of Edom. And so Hiram sent ships to him by his servants, along with the crews of experienced seamen. They went with Solomon's servants to Ophir, took from there 17 tons of gold, and delivered it to King Solomon. Thank you for joining me for this reading through the Bible in chronological order, and tomorrow join me for another reading.